we get to do some extraordinary things. Not everyone is able to jump out of a plane with a boat, land in the water, carry out a marine raid, arrive on land, carry out an action, and exfiltrate by sea. I think that's unique, and that's what I came looking for. What I like is the way we get to push ourselves to the limit, constantly, always searching, innovating, always looking to go the extra mile. It's a unique job within the army, there's no doubt about it. It takes a lot to do this job. There are very few people, unfortunately, with the ability to do what we do, so you have to be able to get the right enjoyment from it. I make the most of it, that's for sure.
You don't know their names or faces, yet they're constantly at work in every corner of the globe. Freeing hostages, fighting piracy, arresting war criminals, or carrying out commando raids. The 3,300 men of the Special Operations Command, known as COS, are involved in all kinds of operations, often in the most extreme conditions. We've been invited to follow them as they explain what their unique job entails and their often extraordinary day-to-day lives. The soldiers we spoke to specialize in airborne operations. In the language of the Special Forces, the third dimension. For ensuring freedom of action and infiltration in enemy territory, the third dimension is ideal. It allows stealthy movement, speed, and discretion.
The big differences between the conventional army and a special forces army are in the way we do things, the way we work. We mainly work in small groups. Generally, we go in first to open up a theater, to be able to anticipate and facilitate the arrival of conventional forces behind us. We've got people who are like everyone else, we just work differently.
Whether they're part of the Army, Navy or Air Force, the COS units are a group of specially trained units, equipped with the most advanced systems to carry out targeted missions in record time. This is the case with parachutists like Dorian, who carry out high-altitude jumps known as HAHO jumps.
I've been with the RPMA for 16 years now, and I belong to the Aquila group, which is a HAHO group. I came to parachuting first and foremost for the adrenaline rush, and also because in my job it's an advantage. Let's say it's a cut above the rest, in terms of the difficulty of what we can do and the prestige it brings.
Tonight, as before every jump, Dorian and the other parachutists check their equipment meticulously. Oxygen mask to ensure sufficient respiration, navigation system with GPS and compass, night vision goggles for orientation with extreme precision, even at night, and special clothing. Just a handful of commandos are able to make these extremely technical, demanding jumps. Starting from an altitude of 7,000 meters, they require the parachutists to use ultra-sophisticated equipment.
The first issue is the cold, of course, because the higher you go, the colder it gets. So that's quite a significant constraint. Fortunately, we've got some quite high-performance kit for that now. Then there's the pre-jump stress, because this is a jump where you're alone from the moment you exit the aircraft to the moment you land.
These high-altitude jumps enable the commandos to reach their zone of operations discreetly with their full kit, which can weigh up to 260 kilos, as seen here. Once they've exited the plane, the parachutists can navigate beneath their canopy, sometimes gliding dozens of kilometers in the pitch black.
From time to time you might see a canopy. That'll reassure you a little. You'll tell yourself that you're not completely alone. But yes, there are some nerves before the jump. Once you've jumped, you forget them and get on with the job.
Some units, like the CPA-10, the parachute commando, complete their specific expertise with a solid grounding in aeronautics.
Encore 10 cm. Là où est posé, droite, encore, voilà, posé là. Ok, tu peux faire sortir. Ok. Le frein, hein. Oui, le frein, c'est vrai. Les courants débarquent.
Here, Gautier's team is setting up for what's known as a forward air control maneuver. His group is trained to guide the fire of helicopters or fighter aircraft. From the ground, they designate targets for the aircraft, giving the exact coordinates accurate to a meter.
Copy, agreed for plus or minus 20 degrees.
Major difficulty, ensuring that the team on the ground and the aircraft are both looking at the same thing and calculating the attack coordinates as precisely as possible. To deal with the objective optimally, the CPA-10 teams have recently developed a real-time communication system, allowing them to keep radio transmissions to a minimum. Capable of seizing and mobilizing an airport to allow the intervention of conventional forces, the men of the CPA-10 can also create a landing strip out of any parts or anywhere in the world. That's the work of the combat controllers on the ground.
The roles we perform specifically, unlike other units, are setting up and reconnoitering any kind of rough terrain. We can land an aircraft on terrain we've scouted beforehand. We can create a landing strip in the middle of the desert.
When it comes to guiding a 50-ton plane traveling at 200 kilometers per hour safely into land, there's no room for improvisation. In the pitch dark, the exercise is even more perilous. Here, the transport plane coming into land is flying with cargo bay and lights lit. Special Forces aircraft usually fly with all lights off, one of the techniques used during Operation Serval, launched in Mali in January 2013. The first interventions involved crews from the Poitou Transport Squadron.
The
Poitou took part in Operation Serval, when the Special Forces went in first, and was then followed by conventional forces in the main zones that were secured. So that involved landing, taking zones at night where we infiltrated personnel and vehicles in each zone, and then we provided support to the forces put in place for those operations.
The Special Forces have been a frontline asset since their creation over 70 years ago. In 1941, the first commandos were already training for lightning raid operations. Dozens of French volunteers were selected to train with the British forces, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Philippe Kieffer. They went on to become the Premier Bataillon de Fusiliers Commandos, and 177 of them landed on the Normandy beaches on the 6th of June, 1944. 50 years later, after the First Gulf War, the idea of unifying the different commando units took shape. In 1992, France adopted a permanent command structure for these special units, the existing Commandement des Opérations Spéciales, or COS. Along with the US and the UK, France is currently one of the few countries to have an asset like the COS, with high-level dedicated air resources.
Nous faisons de l'appui au profit des unités du COS.
We provide support to COS units on the ground, whether it's by dropping or by landing. We carry out pathfinding missions, which are part of the role of the Special Forces, meaning we're first into the theater, or we exfiltrate COS personnel from hostile environments. We also sometimes gather intelligence for the ground troops and post-action intelligence.
Like the crews of the Poitou Squadron, those of the 4th Special Forces Helicopter Regiment have their own particular areas of expertise.
We do a lot of intelligence gathering, which allows us to scout the zone and open up a route for other helicopters behind us. Then we carry elite snipers to really provide specific support and surgical strikes during assaults, or to suppress specific threats, and support the commandos on the ground as closely as possible. We're generally in advance of the other forces. We reconnoiter the zone, give the green light, secure the immediate vicinity around the zone of action, facilitate landing, and we can also provide information directly because we're in contact with the commandos. We give them intelligence about potential threats which might arrive around the zone of action.
For rapid infiltration or exfiltration, air assets are essential to the Special Forces units. These action groups use a fast roping technique to descend. Before they arrive in the identified zone, another unit will have gone ahead to gather useful intelligence.
I'm team leader with the 13th Parachute Dragoon Regiment, and our regiment specializes in airborne reconnaissance. That means intelligence gathering on targets, to allow high-level decisions on interventions, actions, or whatever else. So we can be sent into the field for a variety of reasons. Information or intelligence gathering, perhaps to confirm intelligence or information. It's human intelligence, actual sight confirmation, that will give an idea as to what's really happening.
Always working in small groups, the men of the Special Forces need to be extremely versatile. Although they all share the same basic expertise, each of them has ultra-specialist complementary skills.
We have to be proficient in the air, at sea, on land, and on land there are a lot of different technical skills. So that requires a lot of training every year, which we can't do without. Otherwise we lose our level of performance and end up at the enemy's level when we go into action. Within each group we're completely autonomous. Each element of the group has their own specialism. The aim is to double up, even treble up if possible, so no one person has just one specialism. We might lose a man in the field, so we need to be able to turn around and accomplish the mission we've been given. That's why our mission preparations are incredibly detailed and fine-tuned, because we're aware of the danger we face. A commando action is by definition carried out by a small group. So everything has to be in order, and we have to predict all the possible enemy reactions that we might encounter in the field. It means trying to think of every eventuality, even if it doesn't happen. But we'll give ourselves as much chance as possible to foresee all the little things that could go wrong in the mission. We know the risk, it's identified in any case, but you don't necessarily go out on a mission with that in your mind. We can't allow ourselves to think about that necessarily. We know that's the risk, there's no such thing as zero risk. We know very well when we sign up for this kind of unit that the risk is there, and it'll be there for the whole time in any case.
Afghanistan, Mali, Central African Republic. The 11 units of the COS, a military asset in the service of the government, can intervene anywhere at any time. They intervene on the orders of the Army Chief of Staff alongside conventional forces.
In the past, I've got home on a Friday night, and then at 2 a.m. taken off for what's supposed to be 2 weeks, and come back 4 months later without really knowing where we're going. We're asked to carry out missions all over the world, and we're often called on to fly during operations, so we need a little extra experience. So I did 9 months of external operations last year, 8 months the year before that. We always work with the same people. We're a small unit. Even with the Army, Navy and Air Force commandos, we all know each other. We live among ourselves. We're often completely self-sufficient. We do what's called nomados, so we live with them even on the ground. That forges bonds.
With the intensive training and frequent military interventions, the men of the Special Forces are kept very busy and can be away from home most of the year, 6 months on average.
What you have to understand is these are pretty thankless jobs, in the sense that you have to give so much. We have to give a lot professionally. It means a big personal investment because we all have families at home. That's normal, and we need that to give us a proper balance and be able to do our jobs. But life in the group is different because we spend all our time together. Most of the time, if you calculate over a year, you spend much more time with your men than with your family. So you need to have a kind of osmosis, much more than just cohesion. In reality, they're bonds of brotherhood more than anything. We don't want any cowboys here. What gives us our strength is complementarity between people, being united. We have no individualists. We all have more or less the same calm profile. Often people from outside, civilians, friends or family, have trouble understanding that motivation, that need to make commitment. And it's not actually easy to explain. I don't get tired of it because it's not going to last. I know that tomorrow, or maybe in 2 or 3 years, it'll be over, so I'm making the most of it. And that's what keeps you motivated. Because we know that one day it'll stop, and then we'll miss it, so we make the most of it. It's much more than just a job. You have to choose your words, but it's really more a vocation than anything else.
The first REC deployed their Sage tanks for observation, ready to stop any rebel counter-offensive attack. A little earlier, a legionnaire was injured during the fighting. Legionnaires of the 2nd Foreign Parachute Regiment, preparing for an airborne operation that would be larger than any since the drop on Kolwezi in 1978. For 7 hours, the force fired from all sides in a fine display of joint forces combat.